Hello everybody, welcome back to the workshop. My name's Matt, and in the last episode you'll remember we made this little panel right here. And in today's episode we are going to be moving on to this one right here. So as you'll remember, these little black lines are sort of where I've sectioned off the back into where I believe would be the easiest to make the panels, where it's going to be the easiest to clean the welds and the size of the panel will be manageable. So this little panel here has got some nice little features. It's got this very sharp reverse here, and then it's also got this fender flare which fades from no reverse over there into not a very sharp reverse, but a good amount of reverse there. And then after this we will be working our way around the buck and seeing how far we can get. This panel right here, this is quite a big one, all the way from there down to there and the border over there. Now, although this is a pretty complicated panel, the size of this one makes it much more complicated. It's got a lot of shape here, it's very flat in the middle, and it curls around the back here. So that's going to be quite a fun one, and there's going to be a little less talking in this video as we see how much progress I can make. So please enjoy some royalty-free music while we see if I can turn some flat sheets of aluminium into a Cobra.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and I hope that you guys are enjoying this series that Matt's making about this Cobra. I am at time of editing this video spending a little bit of time in New South Wales, Australia, and let me tell you guys, you that live here have got a beautiful country. It is truly an amazing country and I'm enjoying my time here. But I just thought that whilst editing this video that maybe I'd go through a little bit of these time lapses that you guys are watching now, just to give you guys a bit of an explanation of what's going on. Even though Matt's going to go into a lot of detail in future, but because this is only the second video on the series, I thought maybe I'd just give you guys a bit of a unrehearsed explanation of what's happening, so that it'll make a little bit of sense for you that's only watching this for the first time, or this type of process for the first time. Now basically what is happening looking at this video at the moment is that Matt's starting to make a template. He's just using some paper, brown paper, and he's marked it out and cut it kind of to size, and those little yellow thingies that you're seeing there is just some masking tape that he's using to put it into position and keep it in position on this fiberglass buck. And what he starts doing then is he just starts creasing that piece of paper, basically to see where the shrinks are going to go. So those little creases represents the shrinks that he's going to make in the aluminium. And I always explain to people that it is basically the same as what you would do with a piece of clay. If you rolled out a piece of clay, made it nice and flat, and you wanted to stretch it, you'd stretch it from the inside with your thumb, or you would shrink it on the outside. What he's doing here now is that he is busy marking out that template that he made out of paper on a piece of aluminium, just marking it out and then giving it a little bit of meat so that he'll have enough material to make the whole piece and only have to trim off what's excess at a later stage. What he's doing now is he's starting the tucks. So he made little creases on the sides, and then he starts stretching out the center by putting the aluminium on a leather bag and then just hitting it with a wooden mallet just to stretch out the inside. And what basically happens is when the inside starts stretching, the corners starts forming in, and those little creases that he starts becomes nice big tucks that he can then just flatten out. But like I said, he'll go into detail about that at a later stage. And as you can see, those tucks or those creases become very prominent, and he can now put it on the log and just start shrinking or tucking in those creases, so that essentially the aluminium becomes a little bit thicker, but only by a small margin. But he kind of pulls all the aluminium together so that he can start forming this bowl that's going to become this aluminium piece on the rear quarter. Another thing that Matthew also needs to do continuously is he needs to just open up the aluminium piece, because as he's hitting it and as he's forming it, it wants to kind of close up on itself. So you got to continuously open it up so that you can work with it. And he's continuously just using his knee and his arms, just opening up that aluminium piece so that he can work with it. And I found that with this 5000 series aluminium, it's a little bit harder to continuously open it up because it's a little bit more springy, much stronger than the 1000 series that I used. So that is something that it needs to continuously do, otherwise the whole part's just going to collapse on itself. And now he's starting to work on the English wheel. He's got a rather flat die on it so that he can start stretching it out and also get rid of all the low points and high points, those little crinkle cuts that was formed with the wooden mallet, to start smoothing it out. Now the whole technique that he's using on this English wheel, I think that he'll be able to explain that in much more detail. But basically, once again, you're just stretching out the aluminium and forming it the way that you need it, or where it needs stretching, and less where it needs to stay in position. Like I said, he's gonna explain that in a lot more detail than I can. So what Matt's doing now is he has now fitted that panel, gotten it kind of in position, and he's starting to do some of the stretches. That little stretch there in front by the door, and also the stretch that becomes the flare on the side. And the door stretch is just using his hammer and the leather bag just to stretch it out a little bit until he gets that shape that he's looking for. But what he's done on that little fender piece at the back is just flip the aluminium around, and he's doing a stretch. Like I said, once again, he's going to go into detail about that, but he's doing a stretch on that piece of flare there on the English wheel, and then fitting it back on the buck continuously, making sure that it becomes more and more settled in position, and also using his slapper and a hammer and a dolly just to settle that whole panel into the fiberglass buck. That is also, once again, an added benefit with a fiberglass buck, is that you can continuously use it to kind of hammer form and just make sure that everything settles perfectly in position, which is an added benefit compared to a wooden frame buck that you'd also sometimes use when making an aluminium car like this. So that's now the centerpiece of that fender that is done, and he's now continuing to the back piece, or the rear piece of the fender, and once again doing the same thing, making a paper template of more or less, so that he can more or less find out or figure out how much aluminium he needs to cut, then just pasting it in position with the masking tape, and then making his creases so he can know where he needs to make the tucks, and once again also just cutting out where he needs to make his stretches, especially on the flare piece of this part. And basically this part was the same process, once again going to the wooden log, starting to hit and form and shape it with the mallet, and then moving on to the English wheel and just settling it and forming it and stretching, shaping it into position. This is kind of a complicated piece, but he managed to make this piece basically in 3 days time.
Alright guys, we're making quite a lot of progress on panels at the moment. We're getting quite a lot done. So we've got this panel done, and now I'm starting on the rear half of the quarter. So Donnie's just started the opposite side of this same panel, and something's happened that doesn't happen all that often. And I don't know if you can see right there, while crushing his tacks, he just managed to make just a little tear. And so it's very important to weld that right now before we go any further, just so it doesn't spread any further up the tack. And what we're going to do is just cut a little strip off of a piece of offcut to use as filler material during the weld, so hopefully we don't get any difference in color when it comes to polishing up the body. Alright.
So guys, basically like Matt said just now, I was basically working on the opposite side of the car, and I made the same part of the fender as he did on his left hand side, on the right hand side, and I got a crack in there and I had to fix it, because basically if you don't do that immediately, it starts cracking almost like a windshield that's got a little bit of a crack in it. If you leave it and you don't fix it or attend to it, it'll just spread throughout the whole piece, and that's basically what happened. So I had to weld it shut before I could continue with that piece. As you can see, that part of the rear quarter is now starting to take shape. He's now fitted it to the buck. It's really looking fine, and what he's also had to do is use a hammer and a dolly to just shape those little intricate pieces to make sure everything fits, and that those contours that he can replicate those contours exactly so that it'll fit perfectly on the back before he continues to the next piece. So guys, after Matt did that part of the rear quarter and he tipped the edges where the wheel well's gonna go, and he finished off the little intricate parts with the hammer and dolly, he started with the furthest back piece. That's a piece where the rear lights go and the bumper ends and stuff like that. And that, guys, is a very complicated piece. It's got a lot of shape to it, and it's got a lot of negative curve to it and everything. And that's usually a piece that you would hammer form in position, especially if you've got a fiberglass back like we do. But Matt decided that he was going to do it in the exact same method that he did the others, which gives a far superior result, but it's a lot more work. But he managed to pull it off perfectly. So he once again started by making a paper template and then shaping the basic shape on the wooden stump, and then started shaping it with the English wheel. And guys, he got some really impressive results with that. Like I said, Matt's gonna go into more detail in the next video, so I'm busy editing it, but I just thought that maybe I'd give you guys a bit of a explanation of what's happening so that you can follow along, especially you guys, like I said, that's only watching or seeing this type of process for the first time. But I'm gonna have Matt take over now, and I will see you next time. Cheers.
Alright, so at the end of the week, here is our progress. We've worked our way all the way around, rear half of the fender, tail light, and all the way down below the boot. Now, in the next episode, we'll be doing this reverse here. I'll be talking about how I go about doing it. It'll be a little bit more in-depth of a video, so I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.